you are hearing this, your frequencies. If you are hearing this, your frequencies have been correctly adjusted for the SubverCity transmit. And now, we begin.
This is a test of the emergency announcement system. It failed.
Good. The emergency's announcements can be a real annoyance. If their station is operating at full power, we'd be getting regular broadcast announcements of characters being birthed from the soupy seas, riding their shells into the shore like Aphrodite. You see, every time a dreamer somewhere fishes around in their subconscious for flaws and traits, they conglomerate in those waters to form a new character. When that happens, a ripple of energy gets dispersed, triggering the auto-announcement system. And between each announcement, there is the dreaded white noise and snow. When there are droughts of creativity, all we'll get is a latent cricket-like buzzing, which is easier to tune out. So that's one sure sign that it's summer. No snow. Seasons down here are a bit abstract. Spring, as anywhere, brings new life, and it kicks the emergency into high gear. Our fall is marked by the leaves, the falling, the coats, and the greens being gone. I'll elaborate there. The number of tourists in the SubverCity falls due to transpo crews having shore leaves, which cuts our service down by 3/4. All of our ships get new coats of paint during the service slowdown, and the summer's green employees earn their experience badges in a celebration that borders on the ritualistic. Our winter is when we drop the temperature for the yearly preservation events. That's when we get an influx of characters arriving to make sure their stories are recorded, edited, and cataloged. You'll also see bundled deals in all of the shops, and there's a higher chance of characters freezing. Those moments where their readers put down their stories middle of chapter to go attend to a kettle whistling or something. For me, every season reminds me of a girl. When it's spring, I think of the flighty little thing that stumbled curiously out of a Zeppelin one day. She was clearly from a 20s-era mystery novel, but I could tell she was just bubbling with an energy that didn't befit her plotline. She caught me staring from my booth up here and rather cheekily gave me a wink and a nod in a cafe's direction. To this day, I can't drink champagne and not be reminded of flower petals, fox fur stoles, and tangled sheets. Winter brought me a staid governess, 10 or more years my senior. She was sensible, reserved, and acquiescent in more ways than one. She'd come to visit a lost friend in the retired character's retirement villa, which takes up an expansive area at the edge of our city, and had used the opportunity to preserve her own story during the same visit. Fall was the young pilot who swung her arms around me on a drunken dare on the night she'd earned her wings. Suffice it to say, she didn't let me go for the next few weeks. A little romantic, a little frightening, to be honest. I still keep an eye out for her name on the incoming manifests. And I, as any, got the most swept up in a senseless summer interlude. What is it about the summer and love? I know down here the muting of those emergency birth announcements helps people think romance instead of responsibility. But what about everywhere else? In honor of that curious act of throwing caution to the wind for a few months, this next story is about just that. The End of the Summer by M. Elizabeth Castle. They stood before each other, an oasis of awkward silence among the rush and bustle of camp breakdown. Around them, campers and counselors and parents scrambled to get everyone and their luggage and their summer's worth of camp carry-homes loaded onto the buses and vans. She looked down and shuffled a dozen of her feet in the dirt, raising little poofs of red dust. He twitched nervously, extending and retracting various pseudopods in discomfort. "Well," she finally said, "this evacuates." "Yeah," he said, "totally." All summer he'd tried not to think about today, of leaving her, and had instead concentrated on the now of the camp, but the now had caught up with them. "I can't believe we won't see each other for a whole year." The time would seem to go a lot slower for him, though. Their respective planets' orbital mechanics meant 1.5 years for him. Her long, fluffy antenna waved above her head. His eye stalks trembled. "Zeph," she said. She moved closer to him. He saw his own gelatinous upper body reflected in each of the thousands of black facets of her beautiful eyes. "Chitra?" he exhaled through his O2 exchanger. "Zeph, Her words were drowned out as one of the buses took off in a thunder of G-acceleration. The campers around them screamed and croaked and waved various appendages goodbye as the bus hurtled toward the transfer station, invisible in low orbit above them. Zeph extended a long pseudopod and waved too. When they could hear again, she spoke quickly, her mouth parts clacking in her haste. "Zeph, I love you. I want to be with you always. It isn't fair." "Chitra!" His eye stalks retracted in shock, then reappeared. "We'll see each other soon enough, and we'll have all sorts of stories to tell each other next season. I mean, I'll be going to the transition education levels, and you'll be moving up too." "There's something I haven't told you," she said. "What?" His pseudopods all retracted, and his eye stalk covers blinked slowly as his thoughts raced. Pregnant? Not between species, and anyway, they'd only kissed a couple of times behind the craft shed. She had to be breaking up with him. That was the only possibility. But she'd just said she loved him. And he liked Chitra too, more than he wanted to admit to himself. Okay, fine, it was hard not to admit it when he'd shifted his own gender from neutral to male when he saw her alight from her hive's transport ferry on the first day of camp. Maybe it was family pressure. Every member of his unit had told him that extra-species summer flings were to remain just that, flings. And her hive was even more straight-laced than his unit. Yeah, she had to be breaking up with him despite what she'd said. "Tell me," he said, fully expecting the gel to melt under him. "When we come back, I'll be a chrysalis." "A chrysalis? So soon?" His skin changed from green to purple and back, rippling in his shock. 40 tiny spiked appendages shot out, then retracted. He hadn't even considered that possibility. His eye stalk swiveled to the gaily decorated chrysalis shed. There'd been 16 of them this year, secured to the rafters, hanging there in the dark. Some of the other campers, Zeph included, hadn't been able to stand being in the shed with the chrysalises, preferring instead to complete required communal chrysalis activities from outside the door. He'd sung the camp songs and danced for them and shown them his popsicle crafts, and they in turn had activated the big screen on the door and shown him the results of their philosophical endeavors. But even with Chitra's help, he couldn't stay inside the shed for more than a few seconds. Every time he had to run outside to take big breaths through his exchanger and quell the trembling in his internals. And she would be one of them next year. Regurgitation, he said. He couldn't deny how he felt. Chitra the insectoid was cute and exotic and fun. Chitra the chrysalis would be sedentary and, well, he had to admit it, terrifying. Another bus took off as they stood there in miserable silence. Then he heard a shout from behind them. "Zeph!" He recognized his family boss and swiveled an eye stalk. "Just a second, okay?" The boss had 2 of his younger sibs with her. "No problem," she called. "We'll load your gear into the van while you say goodbye." "I guess this is it then," Chitra said. "There's no reason to write since you won't want to see me next year." Her antenna fluttered over his pseudopods, exciting his internal receptors. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. Others of his folk could deal with the chrysalises. Why couldn't he? "It'll just be next year, right?" he said. "Then you'll emerge and choose a final gender and come back the year after, and we'll be senior campers then." She clacked her mandibles. "It's too long. You'll find someone else. I know you will." He thought. He'd only known her for the summer, but she meant everything to him. "I can do it. There's an interspecies school at home in the next cone. They have chrysalises. I can transfer, get to know them, get over my..." "Revulsion," she said. "Fear," he said firmly. "Chitra, I know I can do it. We'll vid every week to stay in touch." He knew his family unit wouldn't like it, but excrement to them. "Zeph!" shouted one of his sibs. "We're loaded. Kiss her goodbye already." He felt his skin ripple with embarrassment. "I gotta go." He engulfed her antenna in his pseudopod, the most gentle of kisses. She trembled. "I can do it, Chitra, I promise," he told her as they retracted their appendages and collected themselves. "Oh, Zeph," she responded. Over her carapace, he could see her parents coming toward them. "There's your folks." "Zeph!" called his family boss. "Coming!" He turned away from the love of his life, hoping he'd be able to get past his fear of the chrysalises, hoping that he'd see her next year. Hoping. You see? Summer romances just seem to have a magical quality that throws all deference to logic. Well, most romances do that, but there's that little something extra in summer romances, that string of fate where two people from two completely different worlds can meet on their way to different futures and spend a small pocket of their lives together. That brutal ending always just around the corner. And for a short time, you can fool yourself into thinking that you'll both find a way to escape the inevitable, that your futures can change. But when it catches up, you realize that she has no intention of altering course and there's no place for you in her future. She vows to keep you in her heart, but she sends only one letter. A goodbye letter. And you begin to question your own version of reality. Did any of it ever actually happen? Did that summer really exist? Does she even have a heart to keep you in? And you just replay that image of her leaving on a loop in your head, riding away on that motorcycle. All her draping layers of belts, hair, coat, and scarves trailing behind her, never once looking back at you through her silly leather and fur-rimmed goggles. The drifting steam and dust bathing you as you break your own promise not to cry. So that was today's story. As ever, I remain yours, because I am.
This episode's story, The End of the Summer, was written by M. Elizabeth Castle. The voice of Am-Onimus is Aaron B. Lillis. Other featured voices in this episode include Kristen Roybal, Brooke Ellen West, and our intro was read by Welsh Wonder from Fiverr.com. To contact us or submit stories, please visit our website at SubverCityTransmit.com. This episode was written by Aaron B. Lillis. SubverCity Transmit is a Crockett and Graven production.